Welcome to the Healthy Perspective Podcast with your host, chiropractor, entrepreneur, mentor, and author, Dr. Chris Bowman. He'll break down and extract the secret sauce behind his own success and the success of some of the top leaders in every category and from around the world. Get ready for your weekly mental adjustment because shift is going to happen.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Healthy Perspective Podcast. Today is going to be a super fun episode. Last time we had a doctor of naturopathy on. Today we're going to have a farmer and physician's assistant, one of my friends, Rob McDaniel. He's the owner of Primal Pastures and local physician's assistant, husband and father. We've had the opportunity to watch Primal Pastures grow, living locally. We did their farm share, meat share for a long time. And it's been so fun to watch them kind of start over on a new property. And it's inspiring for us because, you know, you go to their property and the pasture was growing beautifully. All the produce was going beautifully. And now it's like we get to see what it's like to start from the beginning. So I'm excited to have Rob share kind of the history of Primal Pastures, his involvement, what it's like starting over. And then he's actually going to be one of our speakers at the first annual Health and Homesteading Conference here in a couple weeks. So we're going to have get a little sneak peek on what he intends on sharing, and then just give you a vision of what Primal Pastures hopes to be for the area, to give you a little inspiration, and just to think a little bit bigger than just your own homestead, but what can you do to be a value and asset to community, especially as the world is going in a place where your network and your friends are going to be more valuable than anything else that you can put your hands on. So Rob, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Chris. Excited to be on.
So we've had Primal Pastures out here for a little while, kind of sprouted to a little bit of fame when you were on Justin Rhodes's, what was that called? Great American Farm Tour. Why don't you give us a little history of your involvement in Primal Pastures and kind of what you're doing now?
Yeah. So we started about 10 years ago, living in my parents' house out in Temecula wine country. Me, my brother-in-law, my dad, and I kind of sitting around tossing some ideas of eat healthier, different lifestyle choices we could make. Essentially what happened is we were kind of tired of paying a lot of prices for these labeled, these organic, these, cage free, all these different labels on these meat. And is grass fed really grass fed? What do all these mean? The more we researched it, the more we realized we were spending all these extra dollars in the grocery store and not getting what we thought we were getting. So we kind of all put our heads together, started the farm back in 2010 or 2012. Really did it more just to provide for our families. That was our goal all along, is to produce food for our families. And then people started finding out about it and gained a little more traction. And we went from 50 chickens for our family that we ended up selling, and didn't even get to try any. Oh. And then realized after about a year that there was, probably a pretty good business here, and eventually added lamb and beef and turkey and pork, and it just grew and grew and grew. And now here we are.
It's crazy to think about, because like homesteading is kind of popular now, like there's a lot of YouTube channels. People are making a living off of just showing what they're doing on the farm. You guys were doing it before, anyone ever thought of like growing your own food. What kind of went into that thought process of just like, we're just going to get chickens, just thrown into the fire type of thing?
So basically the way it happened is we were sitting around talking, and I was under the impression everybody was on board with the idea. Like, all right, we're going to get chickens. We're going to raise them in the backyard. And so my dad, my brother-in-law and I were sitting around, and I went into the other room and I ordered 54 chickens. And I came back. I said, all right, guys, we got 54 chickens coming. They'll be here in 2 weeks. And they looked at me like I was crazy. They're like, what? Like, honestly, none of us had even raised a dog before. So we had grow farming experience, no idea what was going on. I was like, all right, well, we got 2.5 weeks. Let's start researching what the heck we're going to do. So we built a little makeshift brooder in the shed out in the backyard, and then started building our mobile salatin coops and went from there. But yeah, the main reason we wanted to produce the food is we kind of had these different health issues. I know Paul was dealing with a lot of arthritis. I was having just different allergies and digestive issues. My dad was fighting all sorts of chronic conditions. And so we took it upon ourselves to kind of take charge in our diet and our health. And this was before I really had any medical experience or any knowledge of that, just researching on my own, trying to figure out what goes into why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. And up until probably 10 years ago, I was a college kid. I'd go to the cafeteria, I'd crush, whatever I could in there, eat as much as I could, never even had any correlation to how well I played in sports, to what I was eating or how well I was sleeping or feeling. And that's when we started noticing that, all right, what we're putting into our body is what we're going to get out of it. And so that's pretty much the foundation of what got us going.
And as you start to add more animals, you start to understand the nature of them and the partnership with the land. Why don't you talk a little bit about just the philosophy of Primal Pastures, why it's different than a lot of these even supposed organic or free range, type of farms? What are you guys doing differently?
Yeah, so really what we emphasize is regenerative agriculture. When we were starting, there were a few companies who were talking about, oh, we're sustainable, and that even bothered us too. We're like, sustainable is more treading water. Like if you're being sustainable, you're not making anything better, but it's not getting worse, which is okay, but not really what we want to look for. And if you look around the world, you look at, the Great Plains 100 years ago, you look at all these places where nature kind of has its plan, you realize that it's this huge intertwined, these ecosystems where everything works together to better the environment, better the soil, better the crops. So we started researching that, looking at that. There are people way before us still, Joel Salatin, Alan Savory, all these guys who had done these research for 10, 20 years that we were studying. And basically we started with chicken on ground that had never been farmed, never had grass, never had it had natural grasses, annual grasses and stuff grow on it, but no pasture at all. And we said, all right, we're going to put chickens out here. We're going to let them drop manure. We're going to rotate them every day. And then we started doing that. And after about a year, the soil got so healthy that the pastures were, a foot or taller before the chickens could get to them. And we're like, all right, well, the chickens are struggling to walk through some of this pasture. It's so tall. Let's see how nature does it. And then when you go to how nature does it, you look at, the African Serengeti, where you have the ruminant animals come through first. You got these giant wildebeests that come through and the grass is, 2 feet tall and they eat it down to about 6 inches. And then you have the antelope and the smaller ruminant animals come behind and they eat it down to, little stems where it's like 6, 7 or 6 inches or less. And then all of a sudden, all the birds of the Serengeti come through and they pick the manure, they eat the larvae of the flies, the bugs, worms, and you see the way it works and it's intertwined. And then you see that they leave the area for the next year and they let the rains come and then they let all that manure go in and fertilize it. And then when they come back next year, it's healthier. That the way, it's been designed, the way that this rotation, if you will, is beautifully created, that we started mimicking that. So we went from our chickens, we're like, all right, we got to put something ahead of them. So we ended up getting a cow, and that was our lawnmower ahead of the chickens. And then the cows are pretty specific to only eating grass. So we'd have some grass, and then we'd have these like broadleaf weeds and stuff that weren't really getting eaten. So that's when you bring in the smaller ruminants, because you have, sheep, goats, things like those. They really enjoy those more leafy weeds. And so you put all these together, and then all of a sudden you have this beautiful rotation where you hit the ground really hard, you drop all this manure on it, you irrigate it, you let it rest for 90 to 180 days. And then when you come back, it's even healthier. The soil's better, the grass is better, which in turn makes the animals healthier, and obviously a much better product.
That's beautiful. And nobody can look at that and be like, man, you're contributing to carbon emissions, you're contributing to, you're breaking down the earth. You can really see how you're literally building it up. You're building up topsoil, and which is holding more water, it's sequestering more carbon. Everything about it is better for the animals and better for us. And I have a quote that I like to say when I'm teaching a health workshop or whatever. It's not you are what you eat, but you are what you ate. So if those cows are eating GMO'd corn and artificially fertilized grass and this and that, the milk that you're getting, the yogurt that you're eating, the beef that you're getting really is a shell of what it could be. It's pro-inflammatory instead of anti-inflammatory. It's disease producing instead of disease preventing. And so I love that food that's healthy for you is also healthy, for the earth. And I'm sure you get the question all day, like, well, how do I know like what's healthy or what's not healthy or, whatever. And it's like, well, look, if it produced a byproduct that is deteriorating the earth, then most likely the product is also doing the same thing to you. If it produced a byproduct that is useful and building up the earth, then most likely it's going to be doing the same thing for you. So I love that. Nothing goes to waste. Moving into kind of like your career in the health field, what inspired that? How has farming kind of influenced your philosophy when taking care of patients?
Yeah. So when I decided to go into medicine, it was essentially around the same time we started the farm. Kind of had this, personal awakening where I was like, all right, there's a lot more going on that, we don't know about, we don't pay attention to. And I was like, what better way to kind of, make the change than one, be somebody who's producing the change, and then two, being on the front lines and talking to these patients who, because prior to this, I had no idea about any of it. I mean, I thought you went to McDonald's and you could just get a Big Mac and that's how you sustain life. I had zero concept of what I was putting into my body. I wasn't a guy who drank soda or anything like that, but I would drink a Gatorade and think it was healthy, not realizing there's 50 grams of sugar in it. You know what I mean? And I was like, oh, sugar is bad for you. So, coming from my own area of just lack of knowledge, it really played into the fact where, all right, I have the ability to be trained and to understand this on a whole nother level, to where I can actually impact people, which is funny because when I got into med school, PA school, they do a white coat ceremony as like the opening day, where they sit around and you get your miniature white coat and everybody claps for you and cheers for you and gears you up for it. And I remember sitting there, Primal Pastures is about 2 years old at this time. And they go, and our sponsor is Denny's.
Oh gosh.
I'm sitting there, I was like, you cannot be serious. I was like, we've got Denny's sponsoring our PA school, and everybody didn't even bat an eye at it.
Yeah.
I was like, how are we supposed to be the people who are like in charge of health in our country and like taking care of these patients, and we're sponsored by Denny's? Not to knock Denny's food or anything. I mean, if you want to eat it, you eat it. But if you're really trying to care about the whole health of a person, you're probably not sending them to Denny's.
Right. What an opportunity you have too, because coming from chiropractic school, we're entrenched in all the ways to care for your bodies, because we're not using medicine to help heal people. We're honoring the body's self-healing properties, and so we get to think different than medicine as far as not having a diagnosis. I mean, sometimes it's helpful, but not having a diagnosis for a symptom. But like, let's just apply a healthy lifestyle and see what happens. You get to really understand from the medical perspective either how blind they are, how ignorant they are, or how easy it is just to write a script, whether that's the provider's fault or the patient's fault. Because sometimes, I'm sure you have it, patients just complain and all they want is a pill to cover up their symptoms. Can you speak to a little bit of what would need, like, in a perfect world, if you could like redo, I know you don't want to, as I don't want to do chiropractic school, what courses or what things would you add to the medical system that would help our providers be a little bit more, informed on the philosophy of, self-healing, self-regenerating, the body that is sick is sick for a reason, not just because you have a lack of a medication.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest glaring holes in medicine, especially the education of it, is there's just no nutrition. You go through and you read all these courses. You go through your pediatrics course, your adult medicine course, and you're reading, the diagnosis, the prognosis, the treatment, all of these things. And let's take diabetes, for instance, and you're learning about that. And the first thing in almost every disease is diet modification and exercise. And it's maybe one sentence in there and says, hey, diet modification and exercise has been shown to help with this. And probably 99.9% of the diseases. And that's it. And that's all they touch on. And
wow.
Not once did we have a nutrition class. Not once did we learn about the quality of food over the quantity of it. You know what I mean? And so, and I've talked to multiple doctors I work with. There's just no education on nutrition or,
wow.
Different types of exercises or anything. It's so, yeah, you come to the doctor and, hey, my blood sugar's out of control. Okay, well, we got to make some diet changes. But, you look at the American Heart Association, you look at some of these healthy recommendations that they have. And this is mostly, I'm in the hospital now. And the thing that absolutely drives me crazy is when I can walk into a diabetic's room and they're eating breakfast and they've got waffles with a pound of syrup on it. It's like, how is this a diabetic diet? Like, you put the diabetic diet order in, and these are what these patients are eating. And I sit there and I talk with them about it. I was like, I understand that they're feeding you this, but we have to do better. And when I first started, I was, green. I was going to change the world. I was ambitious. I was so fired up. And I think the first 500 patients, I sat down and I talked to them about diet, and I never really told them about Primal Pastures or anything, but I led them down that road to hey, this is how you can eat healthier. These are the changes you can make. And honestly, I think maybe 4 of the first 500 patients I talked to maybe did something. And it's actually kind of cool because they'll still come out to the farm. And I've seen people who had this 32-year-old guy, terrible inflammatory bowel disease. And I was like, hey, okay, let's do this. Let's change our diet. Let's eliminate some things. Let's get rid of, inflammatory foods. He still comes out and he's lost 50 pounds and he feels great. And he's like, dude, nobody told me about this. I dealt with this for 15 years. Wow. And then all of a sudden I made some lifestyle changes and I feel great. He's like, he was on by a lot of heavy medications for this. And I was like, let's just try and see what's causing the problem. And to kind of what you said, is it the provider's fault? Is it the patient's fault? It's like our entire culture is messed up with it because you have, everybody in Western medicine is so designed to have a quick fix. And it's like, well, you spent 25 years destroying your body. There's not a pill that's going to reverse that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I can come in and give you something that's going to make your symptoms go away, but all of those issues are still going to be going on under the surface, and eventually it's going to wear you down. So re-educating patients on that is hard, especially now that I'm in the hospital and you've got, these 70, 80-year-old patients who have 70 and 80-year-old habits. So every once in a while, I think I go probably 1 for 100, 1 for 200. You get somebody that listens and understands and is, not too stubborn to make changes. But I'll go in and I'll spend 5-10 minutes just laying out other options like, hey, we can do this and this will really help. And maybe one person will say, oh, okay. Everybody else is like, oh yeah, just up my medication or do this. It's like, and at that point it's like, well, whatever. I can only do whatever you're willing to do. So I'll work as hard as you want to work.
Right. Yeah. Well, I love that story that you told with the breakfast or whatever it was being sponsored by Denny's, and because it paints such a it paints such a clear picture. Like no one bat an eye. Like no one's like wondering. It's like, oh, free food. That's awesome, you know? But that's also such a fire for motivation. Like what if the next, graduating class was sponsored by Primal Pastures? Or what if there was a hospital put on by, Primal Pastures, like something like that, where it's like the food that they get is better, or, and I think that's such an interesting way to go about it. And I love how that distills all the way down into your core values of why you started. Like, we're not going to be a drag on the system. We are going to be producers and creators for the system to help make change. And I mean, gets me fired up. It's like, man, what if I could sponsor a hospital, like Trailhead Hospital or something like that, where it's like you get adjusted and you eat this food first. Your insurance is not going to cover it, like whatever it is. But I love that, man, and I love the vision. Well, we're super excited to have you for the Health and Homesteading Conference here June 25th, a couple weeks away. Can you give us a sneak peek on? I'm sure this whole conversation is a sneak peek, but what you plan on talking about, and then if people want to know more about Primal Pastures, where can they go find out about you, and then we'll conclude it from there.
Yeah, super excited to be there for that. We'll be breaking down kind of a little bit more of what we talked about. I'll be breaking down the misleading label game, the importance of nutrition in your diet, and the importance of nutrition in one, staying out of the hospital so you don't have to see me. Two, we didn't really talk about it much, but I'll get into it, is we do regenerative agriculture on the farm, where we improve it and make things better. Basically, regenerative nutrition is what we'll talk about a little bit as well too.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that. It's always fun to have brothers in arms, people in the local area that we can just build each other up. I've always believed that Temecula and Murrieta can be better. I've always been disappointed when people have to drive to San Diego or Orange County for the best medical care. Like, what if they're driving out to here because we do things different, not because we do medicine better, but because of our philosophy of health is better. And I love that this conference is just going to start, adding spokes to that wheel, so that way we can all, depend upon each other and really just make a difference in this valley. So Rob, thanks so much for joining us. I'm assuming people want to get a hold of you. Primal Pastures on Instagram, Facebook, all the things.
Yeah, primalpastures.com. Check our website out. We ship direct to consumer 4 days a week. So order from us, shows up at your door usually a day or two later. We've got everything you need. Any questions, Instagram, Facebook, email us. We're there for you.
Awesome. And
now come out to the farm. Come check out our new U-pick.
Yeah, so I was just going to say they finally got their approval. So they're having people out there now, and I'm excited to go see it. We can't make this one, but we're going to be there for the next one for sure.
Awesome. We're stoked, cool. Man.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you for listening to the Healthy Perspective Podcast. To connect with Dr. Bowman, follow him on Instagram @Dr. Chris Bowman. Until next time, make shift happen.